Hello and welcome to the Spark of Ages podcast. We have another special episode where we're talking about the topics of technology and AI, and we're going to learn specifically about defense technology and how the U.S. Air Force plans to leverage U.S. innovation for our national defense. And I have two really amazing guests today. So this is, I get to meet these amazing people in the world, and then I get to bring them to you. I have Colonel Jason Hansberger. So Jason is a leader in technology and strategy, and he's currently serving as a director of the DAF Stanford AI Studio and AM/CC Special Advisor and Director, Technology Capability Development for the United States Air Force. Prior to his current role, he participated in the SecDef Executive Fellowship at Autodesk. He has also served as the Deputy Director at the HAF Strategic Execution Group and as a commander of the 1st Airlift Squadron. So he flies planes and he does policy. Jason holds a Master of Arts in Regional Studies with a Southeast Asia concentration from the Naval Postgraduate School, and he also did his undergrad at the Air Force Academy. He is focused on applying state-of-the-art solutions in AI and autonomy to solve Air Force problems. So this is going to be really interesting. We're going to learn about the special program that he's driving. So Jason, you're here today, but your views here are your own, right?
Yes. Yeah. The important disclaimer is that all views expressed on this podcast are those of me and not of the Air Force.
Okay.
Or the U.S. government, and should be construed as such. And any mention of any product or service or anything like that is also not an official endorsement of from me or from the government.
And then we have my friend Tim Henderson, and Tim is a multifaceted professional with a background spanning military service, finance, and real estate development. He is a former submarine officer and nuclear engineer from the U.S. Naval Academy, where he served in various roles on a ballistic missile submarine, ultimately as a missile officer. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. He was in the same class as me, or same year as me. Following his military service, Tim spent 4 years as an investment banker and venture capitalist in Boston. For the past 18 years, he's been a multifamily developer and general contractor in Silicon Valley and president of the Cypress Group. One of the reasons I wanted Tim here today is he's the author of an upcoming novel, Nobody Wins, Afraid of Losing. It's a really interesting upcoming book that talks about where we're going in the future with some of these autonomous weapons and where big powers are going. So I thought it'd be great to have him there because he's done so much research. And of course, Jason here because he's living it, and part of what's driving the future. Some of the key takeaways you can expect from this episode: AI's role in transforming military operations, challenges in acquiring and developing AI talent for military applications, ethical and strategic considerations of autonomous weapon systems. Those three topics and more. Gentlemen, welcome to the Spark of Ages.
Thanks, Rajiv. It's great to be here.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
All right. I'm super excited to have you here. This is a very interesting topic. We have a lot going on in the world today. And let me just set up some context so that we can guide our discussion. Some things that you guys probably already know. The U.S. defense spending was in 2023, $916 billion. It accounts for 40% of global military expenditures. It's greater than the next 9 countries combined. However, we have some competitors and some strong competitors. For every dollar China allocates to the military, the U.S. spends more, $2.77. However, maybe we can argue that China, because of where it is, gets more bang for the buck. That would be an interesting topic. U.S. military spending is 3.1 times higher than China's estimated $296 billion. So it's a really significant amount of money that we spend. However, we have troops all around the world. We have, 12 aircraft carriers, troops in over 100 countries. And really, the U.S. is in many ways the guarantor of stability and peace around the world. And so it's really important that America continues to stay ahead. And that's why this is such an interesting topic. So let me start with the first question, and this is for both of you. At the end of 2024, we saw some incredible developments globally. North Korea sending troops to fight for Russia, against Ukraine. We saw Assad's fall in Syria, Donald Trump's re-election victory, to name a few. So I'd like to set the stage for our listeners. From your point of view, in terms of where America's role is as we start 2025. And then we can get into thinking about where we're heading in terms of how we develop strategy for this environment, how we should develop technology for national defense. So, Jason, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick it off. So maybe the first is just on the money piece. It's the publicly available budget. I don't know if China's budget is actually in 200 billion or it's higher. It's hard to know. So
Good
it's
point.
one metric. Yeah, I think if I was to describe the global order, we have a phrase that we use called global power competition or great power competition. And for me, a lot of people compare, hey, maybe we're moving into a new Cold War. And I actually think it's not a great description. And the way I describe it is the Cold War was kind of the emergence of two competing models for governance and economics. And both of those systems came out of World War II and then grew up in kind of these multipolar world where there wasn't a ton of interaction. There was clearly in the frontier interactions between the Soviets and the U.S.-led Western order, but really they grew up both, and then there was kind of the competition essentially was who's got the best order, and they figured that out through the Cold War. And in the 1990s, the West kind of emerged as the victor of the Cold War. But this is a different competition. And I call this the great power competition for everything, everywhere, all at once. And the reason I call it that is there's some important differences. And the first is the nature of, or not the nature, but the kind of the character of this competition, which is it's not that there was two separate models growing at the same time. It's that the Chinese economy really grew in conjunction with the Western economy. And what we're looking at now is more of a messy divorce than feuding neighbors. And so as this competition plays out and as the heat does or doesn't rise, you have to figure out how those things get distangled. And in addition to not only the entanglement of the economies that didn't exist in the Cold War, there's also the technological and connection here today that is completely different than it was 40 years ago or 30 years ago. And so there's millions or hundreds of millions of interactions between Chinese and Western elements and every single day. And China and the United States then have to make a decision about whether or not those interactions generate negative outcomes that need a response. And so it's not that there's kind of a world here and a world there. It's that they're occupying the same spaces, a lot of the same domains, and there has to be a lot more decisions about what to react to, what not to react to. And so this is a much more intertwined and difficult situation to manage than what the Cold War was.
It's a really good point, right? I mean, we're not, it's not like before, you're right. It was very much, if you go back to the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? It was very much two different worlds, two different economic systems. We were distanced from each other. Now we're very much intertwined.
That's right. It is a different game. And the interdependencies make a big difference. And, there's arguments to be made that the interdependencies help maintain the peace. And so relationship changes every time something's distangled, because then the price for conflict decreases if it doesn't have as much of an effect on your day-to-day economic activity.
Tim, your thoughts?
First of all, on China, I agree with Jason's comment there. It's hard to know what their actual budget is. The other thing is our expenditure per military person is much higher than theirs. The current compensation, the benefits package. And so I think it would be more interesting to do an analysis adjusted by that factor.
Like a purchasing power parity version of it.
Yes.
Which I'm sure they've done.
Yes. So on the world order, I am what I would characterize as an optimistic neoconservative. But in spite of our record in recent wars. So you look at Iraq was a war predicated largely on the weapons of mass destruction, which did not exist. Afghanistan, we invested over 20 years, we invested more than $2 trillion and thousands of American lives. And a month after we withdrew, the Taliban had entirely retaken the country. So, that was a failure. And to call it anything other than a failure, I think is counterproductive to learning how to do things better as a country and as a military going forward. Specifically, on the topic of the military use of AI or the highly autonomous weapons, which I believe we're going to come to.
We will. It's a really interesting point of view there. I mean, we're definitely going to get to that part of the discussion. In fact, that sets up my next question. So if you think about this geopolitical landscape, Jason brought it up, the notion of great power competition, right? Moving away from more terrorist-oriented threats to great power competition. So how do we leverage, U.S. military's, how do we leverage AI and these autonomous, maybe semi-autonomous, eventually autonomous, to maintain a competitive edge, right? I mean, access to the technology is much easier to attain than it used to be, right? Before you're building weapons systems where you could be much further ahead. They were super expensive to develop. Nowadays with AI, it's a little less expensive. So Jason, maybe you could just touch on that.
Okay, so when it comes to competing for artificial intelligence, I don't think the first place that we compete artificial intelligence would be in the military application or military employment of artificial intelligence or autonomy. It's really, I think the competition exists primarily economically and politically for the ability to design and manufacture and field computing and artificial intelligence technology. And I think you see this with like the semiconductor is a great example of trying to control the state of the art and compute through the control of who can and can't have access to the state of the art in computing. That requires partnerships from extreme ultraviolet lithography machines down to the fabrication or the fab of it. And that's essentially the reason that we're competing there, is because I use computing and artificial intelligence as we can get into it later, but kind of a theory of an era-defining technology. And if it's the era is defined by who best wields computing and artificial intelligence, then it makes sense to compete for those things, not only now but into the future. And so when we're thinking about these tariffs or things like that, it's about who can control the path of the future in those. And then that of course can lead to undesired escalations, because the future finds its way to the present, and then as the heat of that competition grows, sometimes you lose agency, and it's not you may not want an escalation, but when participating in international relations, like sometimes you spark the escalation that goes beyond your control to control it. And so there's dangers, and even in economic and political competitions for these things.
So it's kind of intertwined, right? That notion of it's not just a pure military and technological development. It's a access to, you need a strong economic capability to build these things, to build these capabilities. And so that's part of the competition. So Tim, your thoughts on that?
So the story of technology and the military is intertwined, right? Silicon Valley grew out of military technology largely. But in the past 30 years, there's been a divide that has grown, a chasm in some sense between Silicon Valley and technology. So 4,500 AI researchers, for example, have signed an open letter saying that they would like a ban on highly autonomous weapons, and they specifically don't want their projects to be used for military purposes. So Google, for example, had Project Maven, which was, Jason can probably speak to this better than I can, but my understanding was that it was a project that used artificial intelligence to sort through and categorize the huge volumes of data coming from Predator and other drones, Reaper, Predator drones, and to make some sense of that in ways that humans were overwhelmed, right? And when that came out, that caused a great deal of controversy at Google and in Silicon Valley and even worldwide. Same thing with Project HoloLens at Microsoft. It was a set of augmented reality goggles that could be used by military people, soldiers, but it's still in the formative stages. It's still a beta technology at best. But you can envision in the future someone has augmented reality goggles. They're in a firefight, and the AI is telling them, not only networking them with the cloud and other soldiers, but basically instructing them what to do. and that caused a great deal of controversy. So we have this kind of schizophrenia in our country over whether we want to use technology for the military or not. And I'm hoping that we get into this because I see the highly autonomous weapons as a very interesting subset of technology, because I think they are overwhelming. As to my earlier thesis, they will be the sine qua non of military power. But the majority of people on the planet don't want this, and I can go into great detail on that as well.
So that leads a little bit to what you're doing with the DAF Stanford AI Studio, right? I mean, there's this, I think some of this is from the feeling that, Tim talked about how Silicon Valley kind of grew out of military applications. The original semiconductor, the original microprocessor was developed or dramatically enhanced because of its military applications in missile technology. And so some of what you're doing here is you're building bridges between universities, companies, and the military. So maybe talk about the problem and what you're looking to actually solve.
So kind of my very big takeaway macro view is that the humans define themselves in terms of the era defining technology. Like we define ourselves in terms of technology. And I start this argument by, it's not just a technology, it's the technology that's most important in building both economic and military advantage. And it has to do both. And so typically this technology would be very ubiquitous and useful across many things. And so the very first age of humans we think of and we call is the Stone Age. Right? And the reason we call it the Stone Age is because the manipulation of stone into tools or other useful things generated this durable advantage and ubiquitous advantage, in both military and economic sense. And then that was displaced by bronze, which was displaced by iron, which then, we call it the Industrial Revolution, but I really think it's the electrical revolution. It's really the ability to generate and manipulate and distribute energy in order to magnify human activity. And then the next, the 1950s, we kind of had this idea of, people were like, we're entering the nuclear age. And this was a common belief, but we didn't ever enter a nuclear age. And the reason we didn't is because it was too limited. It was, as a weapon, it didn't displace all conventional military activity. As a energy source, it didn't displace all conventional energy things. And it had some limited use in medical, but it wasn't wide enough to be an era-defining technology. Where I think we're at today now is the compute and the AI, or its most important application, which is artificial intelligence and autonomy. And so a couple of years ago, as I was working at the headquarters Air Force, we weren't talking enough about what I was thinking of as the era-defining technology. And it's not just for military application; it's for national security. Is really rooted in economic strength and growth and dynamism, and the same with the military. And if this is the technology, then we really need to be at the place where it's a state of the art to ensure that we're advancing our national interest in the advancement of these things, and that they're being developed in a way that's responsible. And so through my partner here, who was a PhD student, just recently defended his thesis. I'm telling this story, it's really deductive, but there's a lot of intuition too. It's, him and I at the same time had the same feeling, and we're connected via a mutual friend that said, you guys should probably work together and you should do it here. If what you want to do is have some kind of influence into where the research is going for AI and autonomy and compute. And so that's how we came to be here. Is I really very strongly believe this is the technology that will drive humanity. And I think the thing that displaces compute as the next era, I don't know what it's going to be, but I know that if we saw it today, it would appear as if it's magic.
That's right. It does feel like that, right? When you use these things, it does feel, just when we play with ChatGPT and I feed in my MRI results, it not only tells me it gives me a breakdown, it sends me an image and it tells me what I should do next, right? And I showed it to my surgeon and she's like, wow, well, at least you need me to do the actual work. So it is pretty magical. So to simplify to talk about what you're doing today, right? This whole program is about bringing the different groups together, right? And it's one of the many different programs, right, the Defense Department runs, and different the military groups run. So maybe just talk about what you're trying to accomplish with it.
The way that I see artificial intelligence employed today, kind of the existing technology, is that someone is an expert in something. They're an expert coder, they're a doctor, they're an animator, and they also happen to have enough expertise to recognize how to employ an artificial intelligence tool. And then they take that tool and they apply it in a digital domain or a very highly structured physical domain, and they can do some pretty incredible increases in their productivity. But that breaks down really, really quickly when you try to apply an artificial intelligence tool in a highly complex domain or something with high dimensionality. It's called out of distribution, but essentially, like if you're using an LLM, your artificial intelligence, it will encounter an out of distribution event, which is an edge case, and then it doesn't know what to do. And so if we want to bring artificial intelligence tools into the physical world in a way that's trustworthy, safe, and reliable, then we need to advance the way that we build our algorithms. We need more modeling and simulation to reduce the sim real gap so that I can more accurately, iterate and build the models that I need. And I need a more efficient compute to bring this kind of really inference and optimization to kind of edge devices that the military would want to use. And so our research center is really focused on these three kind of research vectors. And that's what we're here to do, is to advance in those three research vectors, because we think that's what we're going to need to field the kind of autonomy. And I don't know, I can get into this later, but the kind of autonomy I'm envisioning is not from the very start to the very end, that I don't think we have the technology now or even in the near future to fully autonomize the activity in a highly chaotic physical environment.
So right now, what you're talking about is, we are using AI techniques. It's not like fully autonomous agents yet, because when you get into the real environment, beyond the compute environment, when you're getting out into the real world, all kinds of things are happening that may not be well characterized and well understood.
Yeah, I mean, just look at like self-driving cars, how hard this is. Multiple trillion-dollar companies have tried and failed to employ self-driving cars, and we've structured the environment for those things to work, and we have millions and millions of miles of data, and it's still, you're still getting a disengagement rate that doesn't really make it fully autonomous. But they're doing that in a pretty friendly environment. Now imagine if all the pedestrians and everywhere that it's going and all the other cars are purposely trying to make that car crash. The disengagement rate would be through the roof, right? It really would be a usable technology. It assumes within it a cooperative environment. But if you're to take autonomy into a combat environment, it's the opposite. Everything that your competitor or enemy is doing is going to try to make it more complex, more chaotic, and introduce edge cases that aren't going to make that autonomy useful. And so, when we think about autonomy, to me, the design principle is really about maximizing human cognition, not displacing human activity. I think that's that's just it's not technologically feasible within the near future.
I see. So if you think about it, right, the closest thing we can see to a real live environment is what's happening in Ukraine, right? In the Ukraine, right? There's initially a set of drones that came out and caused asymmetric damage to more expensive vehicles, tanks, missile launchers, etc. Then eventually, Russia comes back and they are, able to use radar jamming. They're able to use maybe counter drones. And so you're in this environment where whatever you create, there's going to be a counter to it. And it's a much different environment than driving down the freeway, even though it might seem like a combat environment.
Yes. Yeah. The combative driving, at least, it's just aimed at their own self-interest of getting home sooner, not at making sure that you crash on the way there.
Yeah. So like, what are some of the practical, like you're saying that in today's world, there's ways that you can use AI and autonomous technology to just improve the development of systems or improve the testing of systems that are, maybe you could just talk to some of those projects.
Yeah, so one of the projects that we're working on is the way that the Air Force is really modern. It's using machine learning techniques to modernize the way that we go about test flight. And so right now we employ a lot of engineering best practices, is what it's called, to design a testing profile to explore the flight envelope of an airplane. So a flight envelope of an airplane is like what are the parameters in which an airplane can fly without departing flight or crashing. And the way that we've previously done this is we said, well, the plane needs to be on a negative 20 degrees down dive, pulling 3 Gs with the gear door open or something like that. And if the test pilot misses any of those parameters within kind of an arbitrarily defined window, then they say that one doesn't count and they throw it out. And so what we've said is, well, there's probably a lot of useful data, even if you don't hit this, heuristically driven point. So let's just use that data. And so by applying this machine learning technique, we're now able to use all that data. And if that's the case, test pilots, it takes typically 6 attempts for every one testing point. And so now we're able to say, hey, we could do this in 6 times less because you're going to hit your point every time because the tolerances aren't so tight. And so for 6 times faster and for 6 times less money, we can achieve the same kind of assurity on understanding the parameters of flight. And so this is kind of a great example of our approach, which is to really go inside an Air Force organization or a problem holder and really help them define the problem that then we can connect to an outside academic solution if it requires research, or just a commercial off-the-shelf industry state-of-the-art to help them solve their problem, or maybe a combination of both.
So that's really cool. It's kind of, so as you guys know, I'm into marketing. And so is that your go-to-market? So you have this, you have problems that are happening when you're developing these systems at the Air Force. And now you're saying, well, how do I connect research or how do I connect companies to this?
Yes.
What's your go-to-market for that?
Yeah, my go-to-market is twofold because I have to, my primary customer is the Air Force, and so, my first, value proposition is I can help you define a problem. And so a lot of times in the Air Force and other places, right, is that I use this example to kind of understand where problem defining in our approach is that one morning I wake up, I have 4 kids, so, this makes sense to me. I wake up and my spouse says, or my wife says, hey, we're out of baby formula. You need to go to the store to get some more. And so, from a military sense, like, okay, let's do a mission analysis. We had a logistics failure, but now it's irrelevant. We're going to have to fix that in the future. But now I have this no-fail mission, get the formula or the baby dies. So I say, I salute and I head out to the car to go get the formula. But when I get out to the car, it's snowing. And so you may say, okay, now we know the problem. The problem is that I need to be able to get to the store no matter what. It doesn't matter the environmental conditions. So I'm going to solve this problem with a 6-wheeled vehicle and 36 inches of ground clearance and all-wheel drive with a snowplow and some autonomy built into it. And the problem, though, there is that I haven't really defined the problem. What I've done is done an environmental analysis. And if I go, and this is where we come in, right, is that we're going to bring the technical expertise to help you get one step further, which is the real problem is a coefficient of friction that exists between your tires and the road or the lack thereof. And so there's a mechanical solution instead of tires or chains, or a chemical solution in the terms of salt that we could apply to this problem. And you could be on your way using the existing technology that you have. And so our kind of value proposition first is let us bring the technical expertise to you, problem holder, operator, so we can really get to the point where we can either, and this is the fastest, is a novel application of existing means, which you could very quickly field and, spread to an enterprise. Or this is slower, but sometimes necessary, the development of a novel technology. And that requires us to go do research.
So your go-to-market in that, so you're saying part of the problem is in the past, you might have designed a vehicle that would, be able to, the vehicle for that one significant situation where you have to be 36 inches above the ground and be able to go through snow.
Yes.
Right. And you might have designed this really special vehicle for that, but instead you're like, no, this is not going to happen every time. It's going to happen sometimes, maybe, but I'm going to design something that can be more adaptive.
Yes.
And then so your solution is to help people understand those problems and then bring out potential solutions from different constituents.
Yeah, I think, one will help you solve the problem, and then 2, we can connect you to, the state of the art in both industries. Because part of that would be well, I just didn't even know that someone sold chains, or I didn't know that there was salt that you could throw on the road. I didn't know that, someone had already developed a studded tire. And if you had known that that product existed, it probably would have pulled you further into the problem, because you would have said, no, wait, guys, we don't need 36 inch there. It's like, for this one time, we could just put studded tires on the car and we'd be just fine. So part of it is just bringing an awareness of, and I don't have it either, right? And so,
Yeah.
but it's building a network, and having geographic co-location gives you a better shot at knowing someone who might know of the solution.
And are you offering funds for those companies? Is this part of the?
Yeah, so there's two is, then we find a company, we can put a company under contract through, different mechanisms. We have like federal acquisition regulations, but there's also some non-federal acquisition regulations, that we apply to all the other transition authorities. It gets really arcane, really, or esoteric really, really fast. But we do have mechanisms to put people under contract to, the problem holder will have the mechanism to like put someone under contract to help them solve their problem. Like we just hosted AFWorks is kind of our innovation acquisition, and we just did a 2-day workshop to help identify. We're building an autonomy architecture for Air Force Special Operations Command's autonomous technology, and we had 40 plus vendors show up for 2 days and help us define problems, and then we're going to evaluate this architecture for utility. So that's one, and then the other is garnering what's called research and development funds, to then bring to Stanford to conduct research here if needed. And our primary partners are the Aero, Astro, Electrical Engineering, and Computer Science departments.
That's super cool. It's a way to get things done quickly and enable things to move faster. So, when you talk about highly autonomous weapons, so Jason, this is maybe your own personal view, not, the Air Force point of view. Where do you think things are going?
Yeah, so I'll say the first place it has to go is to develop algorithms that can work with people. So, the way I need an autonomous tool that I can task. And so, we can say at a very low level, what do I want it to do? I want it to fix a video problem or an audio problem, but in the physical environment, let's say I want it to fly from point A to point B. And in a peacetime environment, that's a pretty standard, very well structured, especially in the U.S. air system, like this very well structured environment where you can build an autonomous solution to that. But as it does that, what I really needed to do is if I give it a task to accomplish, I need it to either accomplish the task given the constraints and restraints that I gave it up front, or I need it to recognize when it can't do it with the level of surety that I've told it to. So I may say, hey, if you are 90% sure that you can accomplish this task, then keep going and do it. But as soon as you realize that you're not at that threshold, I need you to raise your hand and say, I need a human intervention, or I need to let you know that I'm not going to accomplish this in the way that you thought. This is actually really hard. It's probably the only thing it's one step less hard than saying go from takeoff to landing and do everything in between and never need any intervention. One step below that is to say, get this task done, but then recognize when you need your help. But the important thing is that this is how humans work, right? Rajiv, if you and I are working together, you're my boss and you're like, go get this done. And then I go do it until the point that I reach the limit of my agency or I reach the limit of my capability. And then I put my hand up and I say, hey, Rajiv, you need to give me more agency to go do this thing if you want me to finish the job. Here's where I'm at. Are you good with me going forward? Or, hey, I can't figure this out. I just need another perspective, or I'm out of bandwidth. You need to send me someone else to help me because I can't get this done on my own. But that's how humans work together. I think that's the kind of autonomy that we need to build, so that in uncertain environments, or as the potential for encountering edge cases or novel cases, that an autonomy can augment a human versus but if they're so fragile, then they're just going to consume all the human cognition and trying to supervise it. So I had this. If anybody drives a Tesla, I'm driving down the freeway and I get frustrated at it for yelling at me for not looking at the road enough. But I'm like, this car is capable enough to safely execute, the task at hand without me having to stare down the road, because I can see what I need to see on the screen and I'm geeking out on the energy consumption. But it's a policy problem there, right? But then when I drive it, in a neighborhood with no lines and no curbs and trees randomly there, and then it's more work for me to supervise its physical execution of the driving task. than it is for me just to drive it myself, right? When you have those mismatches, it's not super useful. And so for us, we really, as a Air Force, I think this is my view, right? This is my thinking is our design principle needs to be the maximization of human cognition. And then you build out capability from there versus I want to take a human completely out of this thing and go do and let it go do its thing. And I think that's really, really difficult and more likely to generate either undesirable outcomes or mission failure.
That's really helpful to understand. So the Department of the Air Force, or DAF, Stanford AI Studio, is working to ensure that the DAF has enough personnel with PhDs in AI and related fields. So considering the strategic importance of AI for national security, what unique opportunities does the DAF Stanford AI Studio offer that may attract talent seeking to make a meaningful impact beyond commercial applications? How do you address the value proposition for AI experts?
I think so maybe there's two audiences for this one. One is Air Force and Space Force, airmen and guardians who are out and, really want to be connected to getting into Stanford for a PhD is really, 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 really hard.
Oh yeah. My son is applying. It's hard.
But, I think us having a presence here helps reduce some of the risk that a professor would consider when taking on an Air Force student. So there's two hurdles to clear for an Air Force or Guardian. That's for the Air Force to approve for you to go study for a PhD, and then the even harder thing of getting an elite research institution to accept you for admittance. And so, but I think that having the studio here gives us personal relationships and connections to some of the PIs who are going to the principal investigators or professors are for the professor to say, this is a person who I think can successfully navigate this very, very challenging PhD program in 3 years, because that's what the Air Force requires, is a 3-year PhD, sometimes expendable up to like 3.5. But it's, what most people are doing in 5 years, we're asking our airmen to do in 3. And so by connecting to the studio as an airman now, before you apply, you have an opportunity to do some research and show some of your research chops and make some of the connections with the people who make decisions about admissions, or at least make recommendations for admissions. And so I think it definitely increases the probability of your acceptance, although that's about you and your ability and do you have what it takes. From a civilian side, if you're a PhD student at Stanford, or you're a professor at Stanford, and you want an opportunity to have your research fielded immediately on physical assets through our partnership with the Test Center, this is a really, really exciting way for you to prove your research in the real world on a timeline that would be really difficult to do otherwise, because not everybody has airplanes that they can dedicate towards testing profiles. So I found that a lot of professors, become excited at the prospect of being able to not only do applicable and useful research, but then validate it in the real world on a really accelerated timeline.
Well, that's super cool. So 3 years, that's very fast for a PhD. I love it. And it's an exciting way to get your project funded and get it in an elite place. So it's really amazing. So Tim, I have this question for you. And I think you've been alluding to it, and we want to really understand this, right? One of the reasons you wrote the book is to really help us think practically about where these things are going. So as AI systems become more prevalent in military decision making, you think about, here's a question. It's more in the minds of a lot of our listeners, right? We always keep thinking way out, and we say, oh, it's like Terminator or Skynet or something like that, in that kind of situation. So how do we make sure that humans remain the ultimate decision makers? How do we maintain accountability for actions taken by AI systems? And as a society, how do we ensure that the development and deployment of these weapons align with our values and international norms?
So first of all, I'll say that I believe that the U.S. military currently is you look back through history and you look over geography right now, the U.S. military is probably one of the most ethical militaries that's ever existed in the history of humanity right now, right? So you saw it in Iraq and Afghanistan. We had significant civilian casualties, unfortunately, but we also took enormous pains and went through elaborate protocols to avoid that as much as possible. And you're also seeing that right now in our, what I will say is our reluctance to use highly autonomous weapons. Now, I think, and I feel quite strongly about this, I think that eventually that reluctance will go away. Okay? It will go away entirely. Highly autonomous weapons, or HAWs as I call them, weapons which will navigate over large geographies in long periods of time and kill with complete autonomy, will become the sine qua non of great power conflict. Maybe not against the Taliban, but of great power conflict against Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, within the next 30 years. And that will happen across all arenas. So we're seeing that right now in the Ukraine, primarily in aerial warfare, but also in sea surface warfare and ground warfare. But it will also expand to space, cyber warfare, psychological, and command and control. And I think what will happen is we will build these capabilities slowly, and then it could be, a decade, 2, 3 decades in the future. But the time of another 9/11 or another Pearl Harbor will come, and sort of the nuanced perspective, these reservations will evaporate. Okay, that's my belief. And if you think back in history to World War II, for example, I think there's a very instructive historical fact, which is prior to Pearl Harbor, unrestricted submarine warfare, submarines targeting merchant ships was illegal. And the U.S. was a signatory to not one, but 2 different treaties making that illegal. So you could not simply shoot an oiler or a merchant ship, a Japanese merchant ship, without first evacuating the crew to a position of safety. And within 6 hours after Pearl Harbor, the uniformed officers in the Pentagon and in the War Department said conduct unrestricted submarine warfare against Japan. And there's no evidence that they consulted civilian authority over them. And so it's a very interesting historical example of how, when your back is against the wall, things change, and they change very quickly. And I think another great example of that is what we're seeing right now in Ukraine. Ukraine has made enormous strides in autonomous warfare in ways that, prior to Putin invading, several years ago, that I don't think anyone would have predicted the effectiveness of drone warfare in aerial, in surface, in sea surface, in ground warfare. Just, I think it was 8-9 days ago, basically the Ukrainians had what I would call an autonomous air-ground assault platoon. And now these weapons were not completely autonomous. They were first-person view weapons, right? But they attacked with no humans attacking with them, right? And so I can go through why I believe in this, sine qua non hypothesis. And look, I put out 30 years as the horizon. It could be 20 years, it could be 40 years. It's hard to say with precision, right?
So you think, like, basically once you're attacked, a lot of these rules that you have kind of go out the window, right? And
Yes.
At the same time, potentially there are some things that we do. We don't use nuclear weapons. We don't use biological weapons. For the most part, we don't use chemical weapons. I understand there's certain types of weapons that can blind people in battle that are not being used. I wonder if there is, just because you have it, you have to use it, or maybe it'll backfire. It'll boomerang on us. I don't know, Jason, if you have a thought on this one. You guys have studied this way more than I have.
Yeah, I think international relations theory would definitely point to norms changing under extraordinary pressure. And so a way to think of it is that values or restraints that limit your effectiveness can become luxuries that you can't afford when you're contemplating your own existence. And so you will see rapidly evolving norms, rules, policies, even laws in proportion to the threat that exists.
So, Rajiv, back 2 points. One on the difference between nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons and highly autonomous weapons. They're quite different. And there's a book called Army of None by a Center for New American Security analyst, Paul Shar, that does a really nice job of analyzing this. It basically says, look, it'd be a big mistake to look at the relative success that we've had in preventing proliferation of NBC weapons to autonomous weapons for the following reasons. One, they have enormous military utility, which nuclear weapons don't really have. In that, now obviously they're extremely destructive, but in that they also have enormous stigma, and so people have not used them since 1945, right? Okay, two, they're not clearly defined, right? The UN still does, after 14 years of going back and forth, they still don't have a definition. They lack a horrific nature, right? NBC weapons have pretty clearly defined and horrific nature. For the autonomous weapons are often transparent. Like if a Predator drone, Reaper drone launches a Hellfire missile, you can't, if you're on the ground or, you can't tell whether an algorithm authorized that launch or whether a human did, right? And five, they're the ultimate dual use technology, right? So they can be, autonomous vehicles, Waymo, whatever company algorithm, right, gets developed, and eventually that algorithm finds its way to control tanks or armored personnel carriers or not tanks or other autonomous military vehicles through espionage, through
somehow technology gets out, right? I mean, it's always going to leak, or it already might be developed the other way and it's coming one way or the other way. Right? We don't know for sure, right? So you're right. I mean, so there's one it's a super high cost, where the other one it's where AI and autonomy is more incremental and it has common usage and dual usage, so it can seep in. And in a way, we do have wars in the sense that we have cyber wars. And because they're quote unquote low cost, they're happening all the time, right? There's all kinds of things that are happening that are quote unquote low cost. And so there's an argument. The argument is that, which I think you make really well, is like, well, these sorts of weapons are, when they make sense, we'll use them because they'll help us win.
Right.
Right. Okay. AI and autonomy presents the ability to enhance various aspects of the kill chain. How can the military effectively leverage AI to improve the speed, accuracy, and effectiveness of this process while accounting for the human element?
So I don't really use the term kill chain too much because it's
not a great term.
I like to say long range decision making with imperfect information.
I like that. Long range decision making. You must have an acronym for that, like you had for everything all at once.
I don't yet. I probably do need one. But this, the challenges faced in long range decision making under imperfect information aren't unique to a kill chain. I think there's a lot of research from like where to preposition your Uber. So this is a very, very common problem faced by anybody trying to manage a lot of elements in a geographically diverse space, collecting information, because we have sensors and so do any technology company. And so how do you optimize is really these optimization problems and then seeking to, make better decisions from it. And like how to preserve the human element in it. To me, it's ensuring that all your operations are embedded with clearly well thought out, values driven constraints and restraints. Because even if we say like, we're not there, but let's say there is this fully autonomous thing that you can send out on missions, nothing's really fully autonomous, right? Because at some point it's being given a mission directive from a human. And within that mission directive, you're saying, these are the tasks you have to accomplish. These are the decision parameters that must be met. And then there's somebody building those, so there's lots of humanness within all of this building, until the autonomy spawns itself and, runs its own country and, things like that. Like these things reflect the humans who built them. And so I think, making sure that from the very start of the creation of any kind of autonomous system, you're embedding it with the kinds of values that are important to us, that's where you have to start. And then based on policy and values and the situation, you need to put gates at decision making to ensure that there's a human there to understand it and to make the decision.
It's interesting. So Tim, do you think that AI will eventually be able to do its own mission directives? And if so, what should we do about it?
I agree with Jason in that a human, in my time frame of 30, 40 years, a human still is sort of setting the parameters, right? Like, this is the commander's intent. But my definition of a completely autonomous weapon is one that navigates over large geographies, long periods of time, kills with complete autonomy. No one's picking a particular target that, I want you to kill this particular tank. It's, look, I want you to go out over this, 1,000 square kilometers over the next 3 days and kill any enemy vehicle or troop concentration you see in that time. That's what I would term a completely autonomous weapon. And I think they'll be very effective across all those arenas, and I'll tick through these reasons quickly. And if you have a question on one or two of them, let me know. One is just reaction time. Okay. Whether it's a Navy phalanx, a collaborative combat aircraft, a bullfrog, anti-drone machine gun. 2 is they operate without fear and fatigue. 3 is they can be engineered to function largely imperviously to G-forces, cold, heat, altitude. They're largely impervious to biological, chemical, and radiological weapons. They have enormous cost advantages. You strip out the armor plating, you strip out the human user interface. They can operate with a high degree of plausible deniability. So that's, Russia's Little Green Men or the Gary Powers flight. They can autonomy can be incorporated into less than the lethal weapons like, rubber bullet machine guns or tear gas dispensers. And I think that's important in that, at Tiananmen Square, the protest worked, at least temporarily, because the Chinese army was the famous picture of the tank man in Tiananmen Square, that tank commander didn't want to run over that civilian, right? An autonomous version can be programmed to do that without, so in other words,
right. But someone has to control it, though. Someone has to to give it that objective.
But what I'm saying is the dictator, the authoritarian power, no longer needs to convince some significant subset of the police and army to repress the population.
That's right. So like you're in a protest and you tell the police to go and do, to harm the crowd, and you hope the police think of their own families before they do it, but they don't, right? Some don't, some do, right? And you're saying that possibility exists, whereas with an autonomous weapon, it may not have that decision-making fail safe in a way.
Yes.
So, but I mean, I don't know about you, but I still feel like we're still going to have to hold the person accountable, the one who sent that system in.
Well, of course. I mean, right? you would hope that in our international rules-based world order that would happen. But
the potential exists so the fail-safes aren't there to the same extent.
Right. So, in a nutshell, I don't know that we have time to fully explore this, but in a nutshell, I think that, again, highly autonomous weapons are a very interesting subset of technology because the majority of the people on the planet do not want them to happen, but they will absolutely happen within the next 30 years. And so what does that mean about the relationship of humanity and technology? And so then that you can use that as kind of a crowbar to kind of pry open that box. And what you find is that humanity doesn't put a lot of or really any restrictions on developing technology. Technology gets developed, and if it's controversial, sometimes it gets developed in secret. And then we backfill, the morality around it. And in a world of nuclear weapons, engineered pandemics, climate change, do we have, are we reaching a point where those technologies are operating so quickly that we cannot fix the problems that they create? I think humanity has two options. One is what I would call more tech. The other one's change human behavior, right? And what more tech looks like is more technology. So, for example, nuclear weapons, we come up with Reagan's Star Wars, right? Climate change, we inject atmospheric sulfate to reflect more sunlight. But again, in a world of hypersonic weapons, of torpedoes with nuclear warheads, in an age of potentially a point of no return on climate change, which is a lot of people think is 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperature levels. The more tech thing, doesn't work because you don't have enough time to deploy the solution.
Jason and Tim, welcome to the Spark Tank, where military strategists dissect the future of high-tech warfare. This is where two seasoned officers, one former officer, one current officer, with deep experience in national security, strategy, and military innovation are forced to leverage their expertise and engage in a high-stakes debate. They're not just discussing the theory of AI and autonomy. They've been to the front lines of implementing these technologies in the military. They dissected the complexities of integrating AI into the military, confronted the ethical dilemmas of autonomous weapons, and explored the talent landscape required to make it happen. Now it's time for fun. This is the ultimate military innovation showdown where only one strategic vision can prevail. So basically, this game is 2 truths and a lie. I'm going to read you 3 statements. 2 are true, 1 is a lie. You've got to pick out which one is the lie. I'm going to count down to, I'm going to do 3, 2, 1. You're both going to show your fingers, whichever 3, 2, or 1. So you can't cheat off each other. Not that you ever would do that. You're good military men. So I'm assuming you'll be totally ethical with this. So I'm going to read you 3 things. You're going to say which one the lie is. I hope you know your 80s history. Pop culture and autonomous vehicles is our subject. So I hope you guys are ready. Here's round 1. In the 1989 Batman film, the Batmobile featuring autonomous driving capabilities, allowing Batman to summon it remotely. Number 2, in the TV series Knight Rider, Kit could transform into a submarine and navigate underwater autonomously. Number 3, the 1993 film Demolition Man accurately predicted video calling, tablets, and autonomous vehicles with voice control. Okay, so number 1 is Batman. You can summon it autonomously. Number 2 is Kit going underwater. And number 3 was the Demolition Man talking about all the stuff we do today. All right? 3, 2, 1. All right, I have Tim at 3 and Jason at 2. So the winner of this round is Jason. While Kit had many advanced features, underwater transformation wasn't one of them. The other 2 are true depictions from their respective films.
I just never remember Kit being near the water, so I had to go.
That's right. I think that's a good catch. So,
I think a lot more dust and dirt and donuts than jumping in water. Yeah.
I don't remember it having that kind of like underwater chitty bang. Anyway, all right, round 2. Number 1, the James Bond film Skyfall from 2012 showcased an autonomous Aston Martin DB5 that could drive itself to Bond's exact location using satellite tracking. Number 2, the 1990 film Total Recall featured an AI-powered taxi called Johnny Cab with a robotic driver that could engage in sarcastic banter. Number 3, In Jurassic Park, which is 1993, self-driving Ford Explorers guided visitors through the park on electrified tracks. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. All right. So Jason is 3, Tim is 1, and the winner is Tim. So we have a tie.
Rajiv, those Ford Explorers were not electrified.
He got you there.
No, they went through the park on electrified tracks.
They did go through the park on tracks, but the tracks were not electrified. It was like didn't let you. Yeah.
All right, so this is a protest. I'm gonna have to talk to my committee on this one. All right.
I'll accept it as wrong.
I will cede that to Jason. I think he's right.
We'll have an extra in case we come to a impasse here.
Okay.
But number one was a lie. While Bond films often feature advanced car technology, Skyfall did not have a fully autonomous DB5. The other two are accurate depictions from their film, other than the protest, the very detailed protest here. All right, I like that. I'm glad you're so precise about it. Number 3, the 2004 film I, Robot featured a shape-shifting autonomous car that could transform into a submarine for underwater chases. Number 2, the 2002 film Minority Report depicted autonomous cars running on vertical roads in a ruthlessly efficient but terrifying traffic system. Number 3, in the anime series Ghost in the Shell, AI-powered tanks called Takakomas could engage in philosophical debates while in combat. So number 1, iRobot, shape-shifting autonomous car, could transform into a submarine for underwater chases. Number 2, Minority Report, autonomous cars running on vertical roads. Number 3, Ghost in the Shell anime series, AI-powered tanks called Takakomas could have philosophical debates while in combat. So you ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh, we got a split here. I like this. Okay. So Jason did a 3. Tim said number 1. The winner of this round is Tim.
Yeah.
Wow. So he's watched a lot of old movies. But while iRobot did feature an autonomous Audi RSQ, it couldn't transform to go underwater. The other two are accurate depictions from their respective works. So I'm going to basically say, because one was under protest, we're going to do a round 4. All right. All right, here we go. We have a round 4. Usually we finish at 3. We're going to do round 4 today, which is more fun because then my writers get more credit for all the great work they do, and they have more party things you can do. All right, number 1. In the TV series Westworld, autonomous horses with AI capabilities were used as a mode of transportation within the theme park. Number 2, the 1983 film Christine featured a sentient, autonomous car that could regenerate itself and hunt down its owner's enemies. Number 3, in the Back to the Future trilogy, Doc Brown's DeLorean time machine had an AI assistant named Wopar that could pilot the car through different time periods. 3, 2, 1. All right. All 3 of you picked 3 because...
I mean, Doc or Marty had to drive the DeLorean.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The DeLorean in Back to the Future didn't have an AI assistant named Whopper. Obviously, because I pronounced it incorrectly and you guys basically know my age, it wasn't true.
It did have a Mr. Fusion.
It did have a Mr. Fusion. That's right. Yeah. That's right. All right. So I have you basically still tied. Do you want a round 5? This is it.
If you got a 5th one, sure.
I got a 5th one. So we're going for the win. Okay. Number 1, the 2014 film Big Hero 6 featured an inflatable healthcare robot named Baymax that could transform into a high-speed autonomous flying vehicle. Number 2, in the animated series The Jetsons, George Jetson's flying car could fold into a briefcase when not in use. Number 3, in the Transformers franchise, the Autobot Bumblebee can disguise himself as a yellow Volkswagen Beetle and drive autonomously while communicating through radio clips? 3, 2, 1. Ooh, good. I actually could have an answer if one of you guys got it right, but you didn't. It was number 2.
But did you say the Transformers movie or the Transformers cartoon?
Franchise.
Yeah, because
So
in the movie,
I'm assuming it's a movie.
In the movie, he's the Camaro. GM sponsored that.
Is he a Camaro? No, but I thought he was a Beetle.
He is in the cartoon.
Okay, this is the cartoon. Jason will correct us.
I'm such a nitpicker.
I love it. I love that you're a nitpicker. We're ending in a pseudo tie. While the Jetsons did have flying cars, they didn't fold into briefcases. The other ones are apparently true. You both did a terrific job. You actually, basically, depending on how you count it, got 2 or 3. That is very unusual for this game. So kudos to both of you. All right. I have a couple parting questions, and we're going to do this really fast. This is what we call our fast final 4. Here we go. And I might just have one of you answer each. Your life path has led you to meet, interview, do business with people across industry, government, academia. So you've observed a lot of different cultures in action too. In your view, what makes the biggest difference in terms of organizational culture that leads to success?
Oh, it's mutual trust. I think that's like mutual trust and empathy, understanding each other's point of view. That's an easy one.
Where did it work best for you?
When I was at the first Airlift Squadron, so we fly the vice president and other cabinet secretaries, and there's a Sam Fox is how we describe the culture, and it's best kind of articulated in a single sentence, which is, I do everything I do, doing my best, knowing that the person next to me is doing the same. That second element is very, very empowering and allows kind of a pure permission to be excellent. You have to have that, or if you have pure permission to be cynical, we've all been part of those places. No one's great, but if you have pure permission to be excellent, we celebrate excellence for each other, then you can accomplish some pretty amazing things. But it all starts in mutual trust.
I love that. All right, we're going to quote that after this. Okay, Tim, what's your personal moonshot?
I'd like to publish not only this novel, but I have actually a long list of other novels I'd like to get published as well.
All right. I enjoyed the novel. For me, it was like a combination Crichton and Clancy novel.
Good.
So I learned a lot as I read. I had to read. I had to look up a bunch of things. It was really fun. Here's a question for you, Jason. Do you have a favorite life motto that you come back to often and share with friends, either at work or in life?
Yeah, I have this motto. I shouldn't say it's we. My wife and I have a motto that you should seek significance over success. To me, success is inward defined and backwards looking. And if you're trying to be successful, then you can't say I'm successful because, next year I've done this, I'll do this thing. I'm successful because I got to this place that I defined as a place I wanted to be, but lots of I's. To me, in life, you're going to face choices where you can try to be successful or you can try to be significant. And significance to me is outward defined and forward looking. So is this podcast, was this a thing of significance? It really depends on, for Rajiv and Tim and listeners and what we said, if it's something useful to them and they take it forward and they bring it to other people. And so significance is defined by the people around us, and it's defined by the future. And so when it comes, to make decisions in life, if you're trying to lead a life of significance or do things of significance, it'll push you in directions, I think, that are pretty rewarding.
That's really awesome. That's a great line. And I should just end right there, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep going. What's the next thing you plan on starting, Tim, and why that thing?
I want to go back for a second to the novel that I wrote, because I think it's important, is why I wrote that novel. And there's two things compel me to write that novel. One is an enormous admiration for everyone that serves in our military. So I was a submarine officer. My father was a career infantry officer, company commander in Vietnam. My son is a Ranger, qualified first lieutenant in the 82nd Airborne. So I would love for my novel to be compared, even remotely, to the novel by Anton Meyer, Once an Eagle, and it's a classic, and I strongly recommend that everyone read it. In addition to the novels, I am in charge of programs for the Military Officers Association of America, the Silicon Valley chapter, and I'm hopefully going to recruit Jason to come speak to our group. But in addition to a long list of speakers I'd like to attract, I'd like to. I wrote a paper with one of my Naval Academy classmates in which we advocated a national defense auxiliary, and we submitted it to the Joint Forces Quarterly, and we still it didn't get picked up by JFQ, but it got very close, and we're hoping to tweak it and get it published somewhere. And the idea is basically that we have far many more veterans than we actually do active duty people. And you look at countries like Ukraine and Israel, and a large part of their success in their defense against vastly superior enemies is the way that they harness the whole of their nation to contribute to their military defense. And so I think there's a lot of things that veterans can do to help active duty units, everything from technology acquisition to recruiting. Our services have fallen short of recruiting goals most years in the past 5 years. And so I think it could be an incredible force multiplier for basically at no cost. And so I'd like to try to be a small part of making that happen.
All right. Great sense of purpose. I'd say great sense of purpose and a great level of service. And I appreciate both of you for being here and engaging in this discussion and debate. And I think it's super thought provoking and helpful. The intention is to protect Americans and protect those around the world that want to live in a rules-based world. And I appreciate both of you for being here and talking about your points of view and programs that you're creating and how you're trying to make the world a better place. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Rajiv. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. And Jason, you as well. I've learned a lot. Thank you.